All right. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining today. My name is Joshua Fox, and today we will be discussing the Aruba Remote Access Solutions. Now, I think everybody is probably aware of why we wanted to put something like this together, but with the recent pandemic outbreaks that we've been having, remote solutions are in very high demand, and Aruba does have some good remote solutions. So I want to talk to you about what we have, how it actually works, how it can help you, as well as how to deal with some of the issues you might run into, like stock constraints and so on. What alternative solutions do we have, and how can we best support you as you start to maybe move into that remote worker type of solution, or maybe even help your customers that you might be selling to and help them as they transition into a remote situation. So for our agenda today, we're going to really talk a lot about the RAP, or the remote access point. We'll talk about an overview of what these are. We'll talk about specific RAP models and some alternatives to those access points that you can still deploy in RAP mode. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the VIA client, which is a VPN solution that Aruba has, and we'll go over the licensing and everything on how that's purchased, as well as how you would want to deploy it and so on. So a RAP is just a remote access point, and the purpose of the RAP is to extend the corporate network for your teleworker remote location. And the concept of the RAP actually came into being on the last SARS outbreak that we had, which was another coronavirus that had started a pandemic, I think about 10-ish years ago. Might be a little bit longer, might be a little bit off on my dates here. It's been a long time since we've dealt with something like this. So, the world keeps on turning, and, you never can defeat the germs out there, and so another one comes out, and it's doing the same thing. So we have this solution that was developed literally for the last time that something like this happened, and we're going to go ahead and be able to have that now today as well. Now, the real power or strength of the remote access point is that it's really going to be utilizing an existing Aruba investment. So it's going to secure an IPsec tunnel back to a controller and then give you basically that same corporate Wi-Fi feel that you would have at home. You basically give somebody an access point, they take it home, they plug it in, they don't do anything else to get this thing set up. So it's very easy on the the remote or the teleworker. That tunnel is a secure tunnel created back to the controller, and now we're able to give you all of the resources that you were supposed to have, as if you were still in the office. Now, remote access point operation mode, not a lot of people know this, but it's actually supported on all Aruba access points, whether they are the campus controller-based access points or the instant access points. Now, this is a little misleading because there also is a newer product, the instant on APs. Those don't function with controllers, so those access points would not be supported to be able to be placed into remote access point mode. So this is going to be all of your instant access points as well as your campus access points. So basically the APs you're probably already used to using. Now we have lots of different traffic forwarding modes, and I'll show you what that looks like on a little bit of a diagram here as we move forward. But basically this is going to give us the ability to still have, a home network or a network that is not going back to corporate using the same RAP or Wi-Fi that RAP would be giving you, as well as bridging types of traffic like, for instance, a phone for your voice traffic back to a PBX, or maybe your traffic that needs to get to a specific server resource. We can actually segregate that traffic from one another, so it is definitely going to be a bit more secure. And we can do that traffic forwarding mode based on the SSIDs that we would be using. So this, what you're looking at here, is a sort of basic diagram that might show sort of how a RAP would be deployed. So typically, if you look over here on the left-hand side, this is what your normal network's going to look like, right? You have maybe your Airwave or your ClearPass, you have your controller, and then you have access points, and you have users connecting into those access points. This could be an office, this could be a hospital, this could be any really environment where you've ever connected into the Wi-Fi. That's going to be the basic topology, right? Well, then you have something like Corona that hits, and all of a sudden you're going to shut down everything at the office. Well, what you can do is give that that person the remote access point. They go ahead and take that, they plug it in at home directly into a modem or so on, and that's going to go ahead and form this tunnel that you see over here back to your mobility controller, and now we're able to basically, like I said, give you that remote access, that corporate feel from home. And the beauty of this is that you've already had the mobility controller set up. You already have those SSIDs set up. You already have your VLAN set up. You already have your access control rules set up. So you're basically just extending your deployment footprint, if you will, directly into the home while utilizing your current Aruba investment. So right here, this is going to be a quick diagram of what I was talking about earlier that gives us the ability to segregate traffic in different ways. So there's going to be a couple of slides here that I'm going to just keep adding on to the different types of tunnels that you can create. So what you're seeing here on the left-hand side is a remote access point, right? That's connected to your modem or you know, your router, whatever it is you have that the ISP has given you as a handoff. And this access point is able to form a tunnel, which is this gray tunnel-looking box here, back to your mobility controller. Now, a person here has connected a wired IP phone directly into the RAP that is now getting its own bridge of traffic over to the PBX. But we can add more to this, right? So this orange line is going to be your enterprise SSID. As you can see, this goes all the way over to your server over here and gives you the direct access to what you might be looking for as far as your corporate resources. You also have access to the same websites that you might have depending on what firewall rules you have in place. Obviously, if you've set something up like no YouTube or something of that nature, you know, the person wouldn't be able to get to that website on this orange SSID that they have. And notice that we've also created a tunnel for the printer so that you might be able to use your home printer to do printing maybe directly from resources that you had on your own servers. Now, we also have this blue line here. Now, these are tunnels for your home devices. Notice that the blue tunnel never goes inside of, say, the tunnel there to go out to the data center or anywhere else. So we've connected, you know, the printer, the desktop, anything else that we have here directly to this other SSID, if you will, that never touches our corporate network. We've segregated them, we've secured them, and we've kept everything separate, yet everybody still has that same kind of access that they would have as if they were still in the office today. All right, so here's another kind of diagram for you because there's another cool thing that you can use Aruba access points in general for, and that is every access point we have has a little USB port on it. Well, that USB port does support 4G and 3G modems. So another thing that you can do for your remote workers is just have them use an air card. There is a supported list on Aruba on their website. I would definitely look at that list before just going out and buying one. But once you get that supported modem, plug it right in. Now you're actually going to be talking back via cellular, and you can still form those tunnels just like we did before, but now you're not really having to connect your RAP into an actual modem or something of that sort. So if you have some workers out there that maybe don't have an internet connection, or maybe you have a worker that travels a lot, this is a really good alternative solution because now you can basically create that corporate Wi-Fi feel any place, anywhere, and still have secure access back to wherever your resources may live. So I did want to talk about some other pieces, some other possibilities, if you will, or features here that are really going to be helping out. So as this page sort of says, it starts with you've staged and you've provisioned your RAPs. Basically, somebody has a controller or they're putting a controller in place, right? Now, one thing I would say is if you are talking to a customer that has no Aruba experience at all, this might not be the direct solution for them. I say that because the power of this, again, is utilizing that existing infrastructure, and it might be a hard thing for somebody to actually just take a controller that they've never had experience with before and set up a configuration for a wrap and get that going. But somebody that already has a controller or already is invested in Aruba, what they can do is kind of take advantage of that next bullet point there, the zero-touch provisioning. So basically, I can now give somebody a wrap, and I don't have to do anything configuration-wise to that wrap at the site where it is actually plugged in and set up. I've already provisioned that. I've already set that up on my controller. This wrap is able to reach out to a free cloud service called Aruba Activate. Activate is going to say, hey, wrap, you have a controller here that is going to be your master. Here's the IP address for it. Make your tunnel. The wrap will then go ahead and form a tunnel to that controller, and it will grab its configuration down, and you're up and running. The end user, really all they had to do, or the remote or teleworker, was plug it in, right? So very simple operation for your workers that might be teleworkers or remote with these wraps. Now, we also do have zero-touch provisioning, integration, and working with ClearPass. So if you are using ClearPass as a network authentication solution, I love it as a network authentication solution. I always call it the silver foundation because you could build a lot of security on top of the ClearPass solution. But if you have that in place, we can integrate with it and we can authenticate against it for increased security. All right, so here are some of the advantages. Again, it's simplified end-user access anywhere, any place, right? It is giving you consistent security with the same authentication and encryption protocols that you would have in the enterprise, allowing you to apply the same access policies and rights used in whatever your corporate office is directly out to those remote workers. It's also consistent VPN access, right? You don't have to go to a VPN client. Anybody have a VPN client on their desktop that they click on and it starts and then you have to click out of it or so on, or put a password in. You've kind of taken out some of the those pieces, so there's fewer mistakes that can be made. Obviously, as we've made the move from in-office to remote, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who, when they were just getting started in the remote, couldn't quite get in, and there might have been issues, and we've lost productivity, and because we've lost productivity, we've lost some dollars, right? So this consistent access kind of takes that whole situation out. And then again, it's it's very good management, right? Because it's simplified management from a single platform. One type of access, local, remote, with one set of policies. Again, that ties right into that controller. If you have somebody that already has these existing controllers, this is a real good way to just go ahead and add on that remote piece. So how are these licensed? Well, it's the same licensing that you do on the controller, right? At the bare minimum, you need one AP license for every access point that you might be putting into wrap mode. Now, what I will say is that since it is the same as for normal deployments, you want to make sure you match the license counts. Aruba controllers will not let you do something where let's say, for instance, you had 20 APs. I want to do 20 access point licenses, but I only want to install the policy enforcement for 10 of those APs. You can't really mix and match in that way, so you always have to match your licensing. If I have 20 AP licenses and I want policy enforcement, I need to have 20 policy enforcement licenses. So if somebody already has a controller with licensing and they say, I need 20 wraps, it's good to find out what kind of licensing they had on that controller so you can just match it. We had 20 access point licenses and we had 20 of those RF Protect licenses, but we're doing policy enforcement with our Fortinet firewall or something of that nature. That's okay. Let's go ahead and for those additional wraps, just give you the, let's say 10 wraps, we'll give you 10 AP licenses and 10 RF Protect licenses. The takeaway or key takeaway here, though, is just match whatever the license types they have on their existing controller. You just want to match that with whatever you're providing them for the quote or order that they're looking at. So let's actually talk about some of the hardware for remote access points. Now, the reason I want to talk about this is, and I mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, but remote access points are extremely constrained right now. The models that are specifically remote ones they're hard to get. They're all become direct shipped from Aruba, and Aruba is prioritizing certain types of verticals like healthcare. First responders are your number one priority. Obviously, those are the guys that are saving lives right now in the face of this pandemic, so we want to make sure that they have the highest priority of hardware like this. Government is number 2, and a very similar vein. They need to have connectivity in order for everything to run a little bit smoother, right? So definitely very important to provide to our governments. And third, the telecommunications. If communication falls down, everybody's in trouble. So those are kind of the 3 pillars that Aruba has kind of put in place for who they're prioritizing with the remote access point specific hardware. So I want to take this time to actually go over the hardware with you on what those remote access points actually had different than the normal APs, and then tell you some of the alternatives that you can go with in case you have a customer that is looking to move into this remote access point type of solution, and what they can do even if there's an access point that they want that we might not have in stock. So here's a picture of a 303H and the Aruba 203R and the 203RP. The P is for power over Ethernet because it has a power out port. There is also a 203H, but it is also very constrained, and it has been slowly being phased out by this 303H, so I'm going to focus on these 2 models specifically. Now, the 303H, itself, there's kind of 2 models, if you will, of it. There's the regular 303H, and then there's something called the 303HR. The R is just a bundle, the bundle coming with a desktop stand, power adapter, and so on, really everything you need to get it set up. We definitely have sold these into a lot of hospitality environments where somebody is using the included wall mount gang on this access point to, put it into a wall or below a TV or something like that inside of a hotel. So if you were to order the regular 303H, you would want to order the desktop mount as well as the power accessories in order to get this thing up and running. But like I mentioned, it is very constrained, so unless you're working with healthcare, government, or telecommunications, it might be hard to get your hands on one of these guys here. Now, in terms of the actual hardware, it is a good old regular AC Wave 2 access point. It does have some pretty good client density, up to 75 clients total. However, in your remote situation, you might not be dealing with that many unless this is, let's say it is for a first responder or a healthcare type of provider where they're setting up like maybe a small tent or something like that, and they have 20, 30 nurses all kind of working in that kind of triage center that they've just sort of built up, right? This might be something that would work well in that situation. So I mentioned it's Wave 2. It does have built-in Bluetooth. It does have that port. You can sort of see it right here on the side there. This is that USB port, so that's where you would be able to put that little modem if you had it. It also does have some ports on it. It has 3 gigabit Ethernet ports as well as a power out port that you can go ahead and power something. So that's kind of the, if you will, the hardware specs here. Here's some pictures of what this guy looks like. If you get the desktop mount for it, you can see it sits right here on a desk. Here's the side view with that USB. This is what the ports look like on the bottom here. I have another slide where I'll actually get a little bit closer to these so you can see them a little bit better. This is what the back of the access point looks like, and this is the opposite side. Now, if you didn't order the 303HR that comes pre-installed with this mount here, there's a little back plate where the Ethernet in port is supposed to be. When you buy this little desktop mount, it has a little jumper cable that jumps these 2 ports here, which is going to go ahead and enable your Ethernet 0 port for when you're going to put this on a desktop. So when you're plugging this into your modem, this Ethernet 0 port here on the far left, that's where you're going to connect in your internet. And then I mentioned that there's 3 additional ports here. You have your Ethernet 1 and 2. These are just regular switching ports. And then this is going to be your E3. That's going to be your PoE out port there. So real simple operation there. As you can see, this is really nice because you can put it on a desk. It does give you a couple of additional ports there, which is probably going to be really useful for that remote or teleworker. Now, this is a 15.4 watt, so this is not AT. Some of the power used for this access point, some of the power is used for this access point, so you couldn't power, a 30-watt device. You'd have to power a 15 or an 802.AF device out of this out port. All right, so the 203R or the 203RP, there's 2 models there. They're very similar. The only difference is the P model actually has an outgoing PoE port for it. Real similar client density though, 50 and 75. Now it is interesting, the radio for these guys, you either get a single 5 gigahertz radio, which will give you a 2x2 stream, or you can do a dual radio 1x1. I would say if this is for a single person, like a single remote worker, the 1x1 mode is probably a good way to go since they'll be able to have both bands available for them. And the more users you want to put on a single AP here, the more you're going to want to look at switching over to the single band mode where you're looking at a regular 2x2 stream there. So like our other access point there, we do have a couple of ports here. Actually, let's take a look at the actual. This is what the actual ports are going to look like for this for you. So you have your 3 ports here. When you have the P model, this port over here becomes a PoE out port. So it'll just be your good old 15.4 watts, just like with the 303H there. I'll jump back to this slide here so you can sort of see the access point front and back. Notice here, this little AC, that's the power. That actually uses, it doesn't have an adapter that goes with it. So that's just going to be a regular cord that goes straight into the wall. A little bit easier to order these sometimes since you don't have to have a separate AC adapter. Now another thing to note, a key note on the 203R and the 203RP, it is the only access point that Aruba sells that does not support PoE-in, meaning that when you power this, you need to get that power cord in order to power this access point. You cannot power it off of an injector, and you cannot power off of a PoE switch. All right, so that kind of covers these guys. Sorry, went too far there. Here's just a quick side-by-side of you know, all their kind of stats, if you will, kind of side by side. And I'll kind of take this moment to say that the reason these are so popular is, one, because of those additional ports. That's very nice for a lot of people. And two, is just the form factor, right? Having something that you can sort of just place on a desk is more aesthetically pleasing, and it's a little bit easier for a lot of people, right? So that's kind of the main reasons for these. Now, I did mention that any access point can be deployed in remote access point mode, so we'll go over some of those right after this sort of slide of advantages. Again, simplified user access there, right? It's a consistent security solution across your different locations that you might have, that consistent access, and then that simplified management. So if you wanted to do something else, anything on this screen here, you could use potentially in place of our remote access points. The remote access points are going to be these 3 here, mainly the 303H and the 203R or 203RP, the ones that we've covered. But like I mentioned, these are all super constrained. So instead, I would recommend that we take a look at the lower tiered access points that don't need to support lots of density. That's going to be our 303, our 300 series, and our 500 series access points. These 3 ones right here. These are going to be really good alternatives because we could go ahead and place those in. They're going to support a lower density of users. There are some good promos out there like the buy 3 get 2 free promo that you can apply to these, and you can still get you know, a sizable number of APs and deploy them in wrap mode. I would probably recommend going against the outdoor and ruggedized access points unless you had somebody who needed a remote access point and lived in a freezer for some reason. But you know, most people have actual offices or homes, so I don't think we're going to be doing some outdoor rugged APs, and there's probably not going to be a need for these high density APs like 550 and 340 series, right? You don't really need to put an AP to support 100, 200 users out there. Instead, let's drop down to these lower density access points. So I kind of wanted to show you guys some pictures here of the 3 main options that I would go with. Now, the 303P is probably going to become constrained next, but this is going to be the best option for you to go with while the remote access points are not always there. And the reason being is because of these 2 ports that you have. You have one Ethernet 0 port, and then you have one you have one PoE out port, right? So basically, you can daisy chain off of this and power one device. Now, this is kind of flipped upside down because the picture that I could find showing the ports was flipped upside down. But you could sort of place this the same way that this 505 is placed here, and you can just kind of place it right onto, you know, a desk or on the ground, right? It's not as ideal as a, you know, say a 203R or a 303H, but it is absolutely workable. Now, if you notice, the ports come in on the side here. They don't come in on the bottom like they did for some of the previous generations. So you could still kind of come right into the side. It's going to be the same as the 505 is going to be exactly the same. You could come right into the side there. Now, the 505, though, and the 305, these don't have a PoE out port. So that's why I say the 303P is going to be a good focus. That out port, it's the only other access point we have besides the wraps that have a PoE out port, and these guys just don't. So you're going to be kind of dealing with that one port and then having all of your connectivity go through Wi-Fi if you're going with a 505 or a 305. Now, last thing I'll mention here is that the 505 does have a USB port. The 305 does have a USB port, and the 303 also, the 303 doesn't have a USB port. So these guys over here, you can do that sort of modem feel, whereas with your 303P, that modem is not going to be an option for you. But if you do have that worker that just doesn't have the internet connection, you could use the modem for your 305 and 505. And I'm getting some tongue twisters over here. All right, so now that we've talked about wraps and you have your head wrapped around what's available, why it's available, and kind of what's out there, I want to talk to you about VIA. VIA is something that doesn't get talked about too much on the Aruba side, but it's something we support. It's basically a way for us to do tunneling. It's an IPsec tunnel wrapped in an SSL header. So this is going to be another option for you if the remote access point isn't panning out. You wanted to go with that 203R, that 303H, but it's just not available. You don't like the feel of the 500, the 505, the 305. Maybe the 303P is gone, but you still need to get some remote access, right? Well, now we have you covered because we can also use our controllers with this VIA client to form VPNs. And sort of the way that looks is what you see right here, right? You have a data center or private cloud with a mobility controller deployed into it, and then you have a user on the road, and they can just put this VIA client directly onto whatever their device is, and now they can have a VPN directly back to the mobility controller. Again, this is utilizing an Aruba investment that somebody already has. They've already invested in Aruba infrastructure, and now we've come across an unforeseen situation, and we can just sort of deploy these VIA clients in a really simple and easy way. So basically, the way this will work is on the server, or I should say the mobility controller. That could be a virtual mobility controller or a hardware controller. Is going to have a VIA license that you purchase for it. And I'll show you what that license looks like, but it's extremely inexpensive. It's $15 MSRP per license. So it's a real easy way to get some VPNs going, and that's a one-time purchase, folks, not a reoccurring subscription. So really easy way to get a few VPNs going. Then on our client side, where you're going to go ahead and install the VIA client, and then they would go ahead and use that client to establish their secure connection. And this is what that client looks like, right? You would go to the VIA client, you'll click on it, and then you'd be all sort of set up there. You have a log of, what you were doing, when you were doing it, and so on. But, just real simple stuff. You guys have probably all used VPNs before. This is going to be real similar to a lot of other solutions out there where, again, you just have a client that goes on the endpoint device, and that person goes ahead and uses that to form the tunnel back to the mobility controller. Now, what mobility controllers support VIA? All of them. Now, here I have the sizings for this, right? So in our 9000 series, you can do up to 2048. And I'm sorry, I wrote 2048 twice, but on the 7005 and 7008, that's actually 1024 that you can do. So it's actually half. But still a pretty good sizing. When you look at the 7005, it's literally about the size of an access point or a dinner plate. So it's a nice little device that you can have and use as a VPN concentrator in rough times, right? When you jump up to our 7010 and 7024, it comes up to 2048 again. And our 7030, we can do 4096, and the 7205, 8192. On the 7210, 16384, and then on our 7220 and our 7280, it's the same at 32,768. Then if you decide that you like the virtual route more, The virtual appliance for 10 access points is 256 clients it can support. The 50 is 800 clients. The 250 is 4,000, and then the 1K appliance will get you 16,000. So as you can see, you can really support quite a few VPN connections if you need to. So really easy way there for you to take that, again, that existing hardware, whether it be virtual or actual appliance there. It's really easy to scale up and just start adding a lot of remote users to these controllers. So we support quite a few platforms here, your Windows, your Mac OS, your iOS, your Android, and your Linux. All the way back to Vista, nothing before 10.6 on the Mac OS, nothing before 4.2 on Apple, nothing before 4.02 on Android, and then Linux for RHEL, CentOS are both 6, Debian 7, and Ubuntu is, well, just looks like all Ubuntu. They don't have a thing there for what version you have to be on. So some of the features here, let's go over some of these. One, it's going to be your secure connectivity, right? It's a IPsec VPN and an SSL header. We do support HTTPS proxy. There are split tunnel modes here for the VPNs as well. We can do wired, WLAN, broadband, cellular. It's going to be a real seamless user experience because it's going to be a single sign-on. And sometimes users users aren't going to be even aware that they're using a VPN, right? So this is going to be, the user experience is going to be like they're in the enterprise LAN, right? It's pretty simple to administer this and to get everything set up. Again, if you don't have an Aruba controller or you've never used Aruba controllers, there might be a bit of a learning curve there. But if you already have something set up, this is a really easy way to add on to it. Now, we also have automatic trust detection. So if I try to form, a VPN or do something on an untrusted network, it's going to automatically use that tunnel, whereas if I brought that same device into my corporate network, it's going to understand that I'm on the corporate network and it's not going to launch my tunnel. It's real flexible authentication here. We have all kinds of different authentication methods. There is the ability to use this with ClearPass and be able to secure those VPNs by things like your Active Directory authentication. You can use pre-shared keys, digital certificates, RSA, as well as multi-factor authentication here. And like I've covered on the previous slides there, we also support a wide variety of different platforms here. So how is it licensed? Well, you just need that JZ148 Alpha Alpha Echo. That is a VIA license, and it's just per user that needs it. Now, every hardware controller also has what's known as PEFV. PEFV is a license that basically is like buying licensed VIA for the maximum amount available for that controller. So if I bought the PEFV for a 7005 controller, it would be very similar to as if I had bought 1,024 VIA-specific licenses. Because of that, the PEFV is sort of on its way out. It hasn't been given an end of life yet, but it will get one. And going forward, the LIC VIA is going to be the way to go. And again, you just get that for every single user, and it actually is not that expensive because they're looking at $15 a license there on the MSRP for them. All right, guys, that covers everything I had today on our remote access. I know that was a lot of information there. So what I want to do is kind of take this here and open it up to questions. So if you guys have any questions at all, go ahead and send those over my way, or just say them out loud here, and I will go ahead and answer those for you.
Hey, Josh, we did actually have one come in over the chat. I don't know if you can see it, or do you want me to read it out loud to you?
Yeah, could you read it out loud to me? I think, no, actually I can pull it up.
Yeah, of course.
Here we go. Oh, no, we have one right here. I'll go ahead and read that. So, can we use outdoor access points for hospitals that are doing pop-up triage and drive-through testing? Very good question. And the answer is absolutely yes. So if you were going to deploy let's just say there was that triage going on, you could take something like a 370 or 360 series AP, and you would be able to use that in that situation. Now, there would be one of two modes you'd either want to use there. You'd either want to bridge that back using a Wi-Fi 6 signal to go back to the main location. You could use the USB port for a modem. However, I bet you modems that you're going to be looking at aren't going to be waterproof, so that's probably not the better idea. But hope that answers your question there. We can absolutely use absolutely use these for outdoor. We have another question here from Howard. Can this solution use HIP analysis, host inspection, profile analysis to determine the remote device is safe to connect to the corporate network and possibly limit corporate resources based on certain criteria? Great question, Howard. Not by itself. That is actually a feature of ClearPass. As part of ClearPass, there's a licensing scheme you can go with called OnGuard that would allow you to do a posture assessment, and then you would be able to inspect the device and ensure that it meets certain safety, or I should say security standards before being allowed onto the network. Things like, is the operating system an up-to-date one? When's the last time a virus scan was made? Did you update your signatures for your virus scan and so on? So quite a bit you can do with the OnGuard license, and that's going to be part of our ClearPass or our network authentication solution to be able to enforce that additional layer of security. Looks like we had that same question again. And then, can we use mesh? Yep, so absolutely. You can use mesh. Mesh is just something that's supported by Aruba controllers and regular instant access points. So that's definitely something that you can use. Now, this actually kind of goes back into what I was talking about for bridging an access point in a parking lot or something for a triage center. You would absolutely be able to do something like that. The main access point in the probably that actually has the wired connection will sort of be your wrap, and then these will be deployed in a bridge mode beyond that. But it's absolutely possible and something you could do. Really good questions, guys. That answers everything that was in there now. Do we have any additional questions out there? You type them in the chat or say them out loud here.
Josh, I had one that was sent to my personal. The question was, can we use Aruba's SMB product line Instant On for remote deployment?
So the answer to that question is not with the wrap solution. So what you could do with instant on access points is give somebody an instant on access point, and then that would be like a normal access point at whatever their dwelling is, right? Now they would be setting that up, or I guess since we do have remote management with that, you could remotely set up what types of things that they could do or not do on their network. What the instant on access points won't do, though, is form that tunnel back to your centralized resources. So you could not use an instant on access point and use that with a controller or as a wrap at all. Oh, interesting. So we have one here from... So that actually might be changing. I haven't heard about this, but we have one from one of our HP reps here, Dave Moretta, saying that they're looking to make the 11Ds into remote access point devices. So actually, that might change. So today, instant on access points cannot be used as wraps, but it looks like Aruba is looking to make a rapid change there. You know, they're always super flexible, so they're going to do something for our instant on access points so that we can deploy those in a wrap mode. So very interesting. Thanks, Dave, for that little bit of an update. Do you have a time frame or anything of that nature, or is just something they're sort of up in the air and planning to do hopefully shortly? Okay, so about 30 days. All right, guys, definitely keep that in mind. Those instant on access points, real inexpensive APs, those are, you know, less than $100 for some of those. So definitely a good thing to keep your eye on for some of those remote solutions. So thanks, Dave, for the information there. All right, do we have anything else here, guys? All right. Well, I'm going to wait just a couple of minutes here in case somebody else has something. If you are on the line listening in, thank you so much for coming in. I'll probably give us another 30 seconds or so for additional questions to come in. And if they don't come in, I'll give you some time back in your day. Again, thanks so much for joining, and stay safe out there and have a wonderful rest of your Thursday.
Hey, Josh, can we send this out to everyone who joined today so they have a copy?
Absolutely.